Hi, this is Gathried. Today, a tutorial to learn the basics of 3D modeling. We are on FreeCAD, the official version. If you're watching this tutorial, you've probably already downloaded FreeCAD, right? From the official site.org. For Windows, Linux, or Mac. When you first start FreeCAD, it might not look exactly like this. You just need to adjust the preferences. I am in dark mode. When you start FreeCAD for the first time, you'll be in classic mode like this. There are 3 standard options: classic, light, or white. So it's very intense in terms of light, and today, to rest my eyes a bit, I want to be in dark mode. There you go. For the interface, you can arrange it as you like. You can move the task panels. I like to have it here on the right with the construction tree on the left. It's a personal choice, but you do as you please. For the toolbars, it depends on the workshop you choose. Today, for this introductory tutorial, we'll be using the part design workshop almost exclusively. So you select it, and the toolbar appears here. Normally in this order, you can also move the icons as it suits you. In principle, we'll keep it like this. So if we change workshops, if we take the part workshop, there you go, it looks like this. So we're with the part design workshop. As a support for this tutorial, I created a memo that you can download from the link in the description. It really gives you the basics of 3D modeling. So CAD with FreeCAD, the basics for drawing a part with the important elements to master in sketch construction, and a little debugging help. As a modeling subject, I made a kind of small multifunction tool, a simple multifunction key, but it allows you to assimilate the basics well. So, to start, you will simply create an empty file. Click here. It appears here as unnamed. We haven't talked about it, but you can also change the language of FreeCAD directly in the settings. I leave it in English, but you can very well put it in French, German, whatever you want. When you create a new file, the 3D world is completely empty, so the first step is to create a body. There you go, it appears here in the construction tree, but we see nothing at all. You can always display it here. In fact, the reference with the XY, XZ, and EZ planes. What's it for, you might ask? Well, it's simply to know what you're building in relation to and where. So each body you create in FreeCAD has a reference. Note that there is a universal reference that you can display here, which is not very visible. So we'll hide the body references, which is really the unique reference, the 0 in the 3D world of FreeCAD, and so you can display it by simply going here, View, Activation, Deactivation, and at the level of each body you create. In fact, you will be able to move them relative to the universal origin. So, how do you do that? Right-click, Transform. There, a magic tool appears, and then you can move it back to the center. So we do it like this. There you go. Regarding the interface, I haven't shown you the small logic cube to orient yourself. It's very practical. For rotations, you use the. If you see, I press the wheel and the right button, and it allows you to rotate. Change my orientation in the 3D world. So, there are different possible modes. Depending on the software you've already used, you select the one that suits you best. The one I use by default is CAD mode. But if you've used Blender before, you can select Blender, and there you go, you don't lose your habits. It's very practical. So, we are still in the first step of creating a 3D model, which is setting up an anchor, let's say our reference. So, we created our body with its origin planes, its origin elements. Now, to start creating another part, you'll need to draw something, define a bit what you want. So the first step in general with this workshop in any case is to make a sketch. So we'll simply create a rectangle. We'll draw a rectangle of 70 by 30 millimeters. So we do it like this. How does it work? You choose the element on which you can anchor your sketch, in this case, the XY plane. Then you go here. On the tool, create a sketch, click on it, there you go. So once you've done that, you see that we change. We have new tools that appear here. And then we have here, in the construction tree, a sketch that appears. So now we said we wanted to create a simple rectangle. You take the rectangle tool here, which is ready. You can automatically fix it relative to. Click once there, and the small tools to set the dimensions appear directly. So we'll set 70 for the length and 30 for the height. I think that's what I said, and there you go, then you click. So you see that the sketch appears in green. What does that mean? It means that everything is constrained, everything is okay, everything is defined, no degree of freedom. We'll talk about it later. So now we see our sketch appearing in our reference. It's in green. If we hide the reference, we see it. And then everything is in. So we still have our universal reference that is always present. So we see that the bottom left corner, it is well fixed relative to the 0. So we created our sketch, the second step of creating a 3D volume. So we defined a geometry. So we're a 2D geometry. Now we'll create volume. We'll do 3D, not just flat drawing. So we'll apply one of these operations here, which is an operation of, so all the yellow operations here are volume creation operations. So how does it work? It's simple. You select your sketch, and then we take the pad function here, extrusion in French. Click on it, and it will stretch the drawing of our sketch and create a volume. A volume, so a rectangular parallelepiped. By default, it is 10 millimeters high. Here, my small tool will be only 5 millimeters high, so you change the value. Click OK, and there you go. You've created your first volume. So whatever you do in 3D construction, you always have to go through these steps. Of course, in general rules, there are always exceptions. Let's say in 95% of cases, the 3D design workflow will follow these steps. So the definition of references, the definition of geometry, the creation of volume. And then now we can move on to the next operations, which are material removal operations. So finally, it's how to manufacture. We start with a block of raw material. So what does it aim to do? Then we'll machine, remove parts. So now the next step. Step 4, to do a material removal, we'll follow the same process. We'll define a geometry, so place a sketch on R, so either on the D. The origins of our part, that's ideal. But then we can also position our sketch directly on a face of the volume we just created here. That's what we'll do in this example. And then we'll do an operation of zone 4 here. These red and blue icons. These are material removal operations, so we'll see that right away. So, let's go. So my sketch for the demonstration, I'll choose to fix it on this face. I click on this face, I click again on Create a Sketch, and then we'll do this small notch to serve as a bottle opener in my multifunction tool. So for now I set it like this. Length is 20. I want it to be at 30 degrees. There you go, it positions itself. And then for the radius I set 4 millimeters, and there you go, we're about there. If we take the sketch, we have 2 degrees of freedom here. So, move it in this direction and in this direction. That makes our 2 degrees of freedom. So I'll position it there, and then we'll fix it relative to the 0. So, for that you select the precise reference, shift, or select the point you want to fix. And then we'll set the length, let's say 50 millimeters. So now we have only 1 degree of freedom left. If we take our sketch, we can only move it vertically. So we reselect our 2 points and define the height. Let's say 25, like this. There you go. Then we see that our sketch becomes all green. That means everything is well defined, everything is okay. And as long as you have degrees of freedom, if there are elements remaining in white, there you go. We close that, we have another sketch placed here on the face. If you analyze, at the level of the construction tree, here you see the face. In fact, here in the data, you have an attachment support info. It's the face 6 of the pad, so it's this element here. Moreover, in FreeCAD, it's very well done, you can. In front mode, it's really all programmed. And you see here, there's a small indication here at the bottom in the corner that you're on the face. It tells you exactly what it's called. So we see that it's the phase 6 of the pad operation of our body. So, taking our sketch, now we'll do a material removal. So, it's the reverse operation. So, there's the pocket operation here. Pocket, click on it. You can choose the depth, and we stay with 5, that's enough. And then we've done our first material removal. So, we're at step 4. With these 4 steps, now you understand almost 85% of the basics of 3D modeling. We repeat. Definition of our anchor point. Definition of geometry. And then we can do the mushroom mode, creation of volume. Or machining mode, material removal. And you repeat that over and over. I won't make the entire part in this tutorial because I know you won't watch it. What I advise you to do is download the part and see how it's done. Then try to add the different operations yourself. And then in step 5, I put here the small symbol of a grinder for additional operations. So there are repetitions before that. So if you do a small material removal, if we do a quick demonstration, without going into details, 10 for the length, less minutes, and then we do a there you go, no more details for that, very quickly. Depth, we do 0. Only there you go. If you want to make the small rule, so repetition operation, take here the linear pattern, so linear repetition. You can choose in which direction you will do it, so next we'll do it over 50 millimeters. You see here, you have a repetition of the operation you did previously that appears here, so if you want to do, it's 10 millimeters. Since there's already a line at 0, you need to do 6 repetitions. There you go. So you did your first simple basic repetition. If you're not sure what you did, there's the measurement tool here that can. Come and check that we have 10 millimeters between these 2 operations. There you go. If we continue our operations. So I was saying here, I added the small grinder symbol for finishing operations. What is it? Generally, for the calculation of your 3D shape to go well, we finish with the radii. So notably grinding, chamfering. So you select the edge, you apply a chamfer. You can choose the size of your chamfer here, and you have your chamfer directly. So these are operations. They are always done last as late as possible in your construction tree. If you do it quickly in the construction tree, there must be a good reason, otherwise generally, we do all the volume creation operations and material removal. And we put the chamfers and radii at the end to facilitate the calculation, because behind all this, there are still quite a few calculations, and it quickly becomes complex. So we finished our first cycle of modeling creation. Once you have that, you can reap the benefits of your creation by exporting your file for 3D printing, for example. So how do you do that? You select the body. You go here, you export. And then you export your body in STL. And there you go. So, if you want to check that it worked well, you take your favorite slicer, for example. If you're used to 3D printing, for example, a slicer. In my case, there you go. You select the file you just created and import it. There you go. It seems to work. So, you directly get the benefits of your modeling. That's an example. Another example of the output of your modeling will be to create plans if you want to transmit information for the manufacturing of your part. So, you will use. You take the TechDraw workshop here too. We'll make a blank A4 page, you select your body, and you can create a view of your part. So, with the classic views, there you go, 3D view 2. We'll remove all these small ugly points, roughly. Well, it's like in the Sketcher workshop, I won't show you all the details, so you select the edges that interest you with control between 2. Then here, there's the magic tool, length, we want it. Here, between, there, we would like the angle 60 degree. A small radius here, R4, and there you go, you can then dimension the thickness. So you can then transmit that, I don't know, to a carpenter or a mechanic, to ask them to make your small part. So that's an example of a result. There, I showed you very quickly the basics of modeling. So with the part design workshop, it's the simplest to use. It will cover 85% of your needs. So the cycle, what you need to remember is that you always need to define where in space you want to build your volume. You need to give a geometric definition of what you want. And then there are volume creation operations, so mushroom operations, volume creation and machining operations. Let's say material removal. There are rather finishing operations. Then, once you have your volume, you can use it either for 3D printing or for making plans. So that's really very quickly the basics of 3D modeling. Now, it won't necessarily go as smoothly as that, so I added 2 small pages. One rather on sketches because there are a lot of problems, so we already talked about constraints. So as long as everything is not defined, you have degrees of freedom, degrees of freedom. It's not necessarily a problem. You just need to be aware that if everything is not defined. Just be aware that if everything is not defined, sometimes there are things that might not work. If everything is done correctly in your sketch, meaning you have a fully constrained sketch, it appears in green. So you see this. You can notice the color change. Everything turns green once everything is defined. However, what can sometimes happen if you make modifications is an over-constrained situation. It appears in orange. You get error messages with FreeCAD. In fact, it increasingly prevents over-constraint, but it can still happen. That's something to be careful about. Another thing to learn as a beginner is a convention in FreeCAD. Typically, this sketch here actually gives this volume. So we will create the material between the outer contour and the inner contour. And something that will very likely cause problems if you tinker a bit, you might think, oh, it looks all good. But then you notice that it's not quite green. And if you look in detail, you'll see. Because you changed something, deleted an element, or added something, and didn't properly connect your vertices. If you zoom in a bit, you'll see that it's not connected. Once it is connected, the point appears in red. Because if you do that, what happens is, you quickly get an error message. With the part design workshop, we create again, we put a sketch on the main plane, so now if you want to create your volume, what happens? Boom, you get an error message. It tells you that the wire is not closed. So it's telling you that the sketch is not closed. So the wire is not closed, and therefore it cannot calculate or finish its work. So this is a typical example. How do we solve this? We simply go back there. You click on this vertex, press Ctrl, click on that vertex, and you can apply a constraint. There you see, it turns red, it's interconnected, and now you can extrude your volume. So that's interesting. If we go back here, I won't go into too much detail and inundate you with all the different tools here. I'll simply show you. So here, this white part is to create elements. So here we made straight lines. We can make arcs, things like that. I'll let you discover. A circle. Really? And here are the constraints at the sketch level. So, for example, if we want this circle to be exactly at the top of these vertices, how do we do it? We click on this vertex, Control on this vertex, and finally on the vertex we want these 2 vertices. And here you have a symmetry constraint. It automatically places it there. If we reactivate our 3D view, we see our volume there. Then we want to geometrically define some things. So you select the elements that interest you, in this case, the circle. Here you can either say you want a diameter, etc. But now in FreeCAD, it makes your life easier. It automatically detects that it's AA. And you can define the diameter there, or this length of 60 millimeters. There you go, that's really, in 2 minutes, the basics of the sketch workshop in FreeCAD. But I think it's good to talk about it. Otherwise, regarding the bugs you might encounter, there's the one I mentioned earlier. There's an important piece of information I need to show you here. We don't see this window because it takes up space, and it's not necessarily interesting. But there's, in fact. So, If you go to the panel, you can display the report view. So here you see, it's FreeCAD that gives you information about what you're doing. So there are two things you can display. The Python console, that's more for when you want to work in advanced mode to make macros, things like that, because FreeCAD can be fully programmed via Python. And as a beginner, what will interest you more are the reports here. So it will show so when nothing works, you don't understand what's happening, you can look here, and you'll have error messages that also appear here with this little notification thing here, which is very practical. So that will be useful for you. As a beginner, the typical problems you might encounter. The classic beginner's mistake is if you try to do operations that don't work. There's always a reason, but typical problem is if you try to add material and the volumes are not interconnected. Now there's an option. You could still create it with two separate volumes, but I don't recommend enabling it. Because with things like that, one day you'll find yourself with a part within a part that is not attached, or things like that. It's a bit dangerous. So, typically if I add a sketch here, and then I wanted to add an element just attached to my piece, but I'm just not interconnected. If you try to make an extrusion of the material, well, you see, nothing appears. What's happening? But if you go back there and then you shift to see where we are, you need to display the view. So you shift, and then you are just in contact with the thread. When you go back, it's good, it will work. So that's a typical beginner's mistake. At first you get caught a lot. You said? Another typical mistake is not activating the body. So if you make multiple bodies because you're making a part A, then you want to make a part B. Or I don't know. So, very quickly, part B. So let's make something hexagonal there, hop. There you go. Hop, bop. So that's my part B. And now you want to work on it. Work on this one, so you click on it. You get messages you don't understand, etc. But the mistake you made is that now you're on the body of body 1 here. If you want to work on this body, very important, you activate there, you can click on it and then add a function, that's also. It's typically a beginner's mistake, so there you go. And then the last thing that can. I'm sure you'll fall into the trap if you make a construction tree with lots of operations and everything. Here, let's say, we'll make a big chamfer. So, do you want to make a hole in the middle of this face? Boom, we create a pocket. Great, it works. And then, I don't know, you change your mind. You delete the chamfer, just like the error message suggests. Don't stress too much about it. Boom. And then what happens? Oh no, something's missing. Boom. Look here. The sketch has a little error symbol. That's because the face it was attached to has disappeared. Now in FreeCAD, they've addressed this, not really a bug, but something that could be problematic depending on your workflow. For me, it was never really an issue, but they've improved the way it's handled, the way attachments work. However, if you attach something to a face created by a chamfer operation and then delete that chamfer, the face is no longer there, so the attachment is lost. There's nothing you can do about it. It's lost somewhere in the middle, but there's a problem. So these are things you need to be careful about. I've just given you a bit of a guide on the main issues you might encounter. With this, you'll cover most of your needs as a beginner in 3D modeling. So remember, define what you want to do. Determine what you need to build and draw. Create volumes. Remove material. Apply finishing operations. And then, use your model for 3D printing, creating technical drawings, or whatever else you need for your project. Things to watch out for. In Sketcher, try to get all your sketches fully constrained. Green. I won't drown you in every possible issue, but stay alert and develop your logic around them. Common issues include open sketches, unintentional feature activation, and volume creation without proper connection to the base part. Be especially careful when modifying a model later. If you have a complex part, my advice is to restart from scratch once you know exactly what you want to do. Redoing it cleanly from the beginning is often easier than trying to modify an existing model and pulling your hair out. You can download the example file to study how it was made. Link is in the description, along with a small reference sheet to help you out. I hope this will be useful to you, and I encourage you to explore on your own. Best way to learn FreeCAD is by doing. There's no secret. Take small steps, be patient, and don't get frustrated. It'll all come together. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial format. Feel free to share your feedback, your wishes, and your interest. I'm always very curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks, see you soon.